Part-2 The AmEx Years. Goregaon 2013. American Sarkar ki Naukri. The private joke at AmEx when I joined was to refer to an employment as American Sarkar ki Naukri. I would soon figure out why. Working at AmEx was almost like being a government job, a Sarkari Naukri. Only in this case, the Sarkar was based in the US and spoke to us in dollars. My maiden stint at an MNC made me realize that MNC culture is far more relaxed than our homegrown Lala companies. AmEx India was a huge setup and had two assets of operations. First one, the back office operation that supported the global business and the India-specific credit cards business, of which I was a part. It was a well-structured organization and everyone had a well-defined role and slotted into established bands or hierarchies. Your position in the different bands determined your salary and stock options, and therefore everyone was aware of your aukat, your overall standing in the organization. I was a band 40. As for the work culture, the usual protocol was to conduct meetings, record their minutes and then follow up on them. To put it succinctly, kahi koi aag nahi lagi thi, including the most people's bellies. Sanjay Rishi, my boss, however, was extremely aspirational. He was one of the first person who had worked in an MNC in India and had seen things progress from the days of liberalization of Indian economy when corporate careers, as we all know them today, were not existent. Heading AmEx for South Asia, he was a career AmEx guy and understood the system extremely well. One of the youngest members of Sanjay's core CXO team, I was stationed right outside Sanjay's office and was seen by the rest of organization as his blue-eyed boy. AmEx was the third largest credit card issuer in the country, and the big advantage it enjoyed was its end-to-end payment operation. It owned a unique bank license, issued the cards and had its own network and also undertook merchant acquisitions. While 1/3 of their business came from high credit-worthy individual customers, the balance 2/3 came from companies, largely from the US-based MNCs. The problem at AmEx, however, was twofold. The first was the fact that by design they were very selective to whom they offered their cards to. It was a luxury lifestyle payment brand as much as it was a utility service. And the second was that despite the pitch of merchants and the AmEx ticket size was 2 times that of the market, the pace of the merchant acquisition was restricted on account of the high commission, over 2.6% charged to them. This explains why when you enter a premium retail outlet, you will notice an AmEx welcome sticker on the outside. But the odds are that if you want to make the payment through an AmEx card, you will be told the machine is out of order. The merchant's hope in the process is that you will either dish out a Visa MasterCard, where he will have to pay a lower transaction fee, or better still, that you will pay by cash. In the Indian market, where the margins in retail are dismal, the high transaction fees has been a big deterrent for AmEx. The AmEx market, therefore, has been largely restricted to hotels, airlines, and high-ended restaurants. These challenges, notwithstanding in hindsight, that time was remarkable, as that was where I learned end-to-end card economics, a learning that would come in handy in my later years, when I would set up BharatPe. The year I joined AmEx was also special for me on the personal front, since that was the year Madhuri and I were blessed with our second child, our daughter Mannat. The year before, in 2012, Madhuri had conceived, but by the 3rd month ultrasound, the same abnormality was seen in the fetus, and the pregnancy wasn't sustainable. We therefore had our fingers tightly crossed while expecting Mannat, and this time we were able to hold our bony baby in our arms. With Ayukt and Mannat, our world was now complete. Though we still carry the thought of having a third child. At work, my job was not to grow AmEx traditional business, but to evaluate the payment ecosystem and as certain growth possibilities through minority investments in upcoming payments players. While the job wasn't too different from what I had done for so long, the payment space was a new ground for me. Early in my assignment, I mapped the market fully to determine the key players, whether they were wallets, issuers, online payment aggregators, or merchant acquirers. The one thing that I was constant by were the numerous checks and balances placed on banks by the Fed privately in the aftermath of 2008 crisis bailout. The private restriction placed and AmEx stated that acquiring more than 5% equity in any company required a Fed approval. All the investments that I was exploring therefore needed to be minority investments. Not deterred by this clause, I made it a point to meet every fintech founder personally. What worked in my favor was that each of these founders looked at AmEx investment in their business as a validation of their business model, which was even more important than the check that would come in their way. Paytm and the rebound Mobikwik deal. As a part of my investment mandate, I had evaluated Paytm and the possibility of AmEx investing in it. This was before their famous Alibaba round. I had a long meeting with Vijay Shekhar Sharma. VSS was clearly a maverick founder and came across as a force of nature even in those early times. I simply loved the guy and the vision he had. He spent 3 long hours at the 139 Noida office, where he took me through the wallet story and explained how his ultimate vision was to build a digital currency. Having understood his vision, I invited VSS along with his investment bankers Madhur Diora, who now their CEO, and Pankaj Jain from Citibank to the AmEx office to make a pitch to my boss, Sanjay Rishi. Having arrived at the appointed hour, VSS pitched his investment deck to us. In between, he started to tell us that ICICI Bank and MasterCard had shown their intent in putting money into his venture. To Sanjay's surprise, he even proceeded to open his mail and projected screen and show us the ICICI proposal. I was all the time batting for VSS, given the fact that his business model was the future. That he was working at building a network, acquiring merchants and more was a huge plus. In a lot of ways, what he was doing was very similar to what AmEx did, but at a mass scale, with mobile as the form factor, except here, there was no need to underwrite any credit. As in this model, people would load their own money in their wallets. Sanjay, however, comes from the old school of privacy and client confidentiality. In that one meeting, Sanjay had gauged that while this was a medium of future, privacy wasn't VS's fault. Given his ICICI revelation to us, it would therefore be hard to sell him internally in the AmEx ecosystem, and culturally he wouldn't fit in. While that deal didn't go through, having evaluated Paytm, we were clear that the future indeed lay in the wallet ecosystem. This then led us to move to the second largest player, Mobikwik. AmEx eventually participated in the Series B round of Mobikwik. Technically, we were the lead investors in the round, having committed $2.5 million. While Sequoia was already an investor in them on AmEx commitment of $2.5 million, Shalendra Singh spoke with me on the phone and agreed to put another $1 million. A large Series B round got built subsequently, while Cisco and others participating. Another company that I had evaluated and was trying to build a case for with Sanjay while at AmEx was Pine Labs. My thesis to Sanjay was that so far the large merchant had to put several different POS machines at the point to sale to optimize on the lower commission charged by banks on their own cards. Pine Labs, where multiple acquiring banks could be configured at the bank end of a single POS card device. It was possible to set a rule at the back end so that the transaction could hit the desired acquiring bank. I had the highest regard for Lokvir Kapoor, the founder of Pine Labs, an IITian alumnus. He had earlier worked overseas in Schlumberger, the energy service and equipment company, and had come back to India to build Pine Labs. What I personally liked about him was that he was a team player, so much so that he ensured that if he could live in upscale Vasant Vihar in Delhi, his whole team could do the same. Lokvir had, however, diluted a substantial part of his equity, and at one time, Sequoia Capital owned as much as 70% stake in Pine Labs. Besides the investment mandate, AmEx I also studied their balance sheet closely. I found that AmEx had taken a credit line from ICICI Bank at a 12% interest rate. This led me to approach startups like Snapdeal, which were at the time raising huge funds from SoftBank. I convinced them to keep their treasury money in American Express Banking Corporation, which could earn them an interest rate of 9%. By this arrangement, the AmEx cost reduced by as much as 3%. While this wasn't a part of my mandate, I loved to unlock value whenever there was any opportunity. Another great learning for me at AmEx was that nothing in life is cast in stone. AmEx globally had sold their banking business to Standard Chartered in 2008. Little did they realize that by virtue of that, their Indian banking license would become defunct, as in India, only licensed banks can issue credit cards. AmEx therefore reached a statement with RBI wherein RBI wouldn't allow credit card issuance. It is a folklore that AmEx then sent their master negotiator, a Jat Texan. The guy walked into RBI office and said that either RBI had to make it work or they would be responsible for the loss of 15,000 jobs, as he would pack up AmEx from India and go back. AmEx today has a very unique banking license in India wherein they can't take public deposit and do not have a comply with priority sector lending requirements. The lesson that I learnt here, anything is possible as long as you negotiate hard. It came in very handy when much later I bought over PMC Bank from RBI at BharatPe. Grofers pitch deck. Around the time I was closing the Moby Dick Vic deal, I happened to meet one of my batchmates from IIT Delhi, Albinder Singh Densa. At that time, he had quit Zomato and had just set Grofers. I was quite taken by the name of his business, since it sounded like my last name, and I wanted to know what it was all about. It is a slang for a mundu, a man Friday who came help with odds and ends, Albinder explained. Essentially, at the time they were encouraging merchants not to keep their own delivery boy, but to use Grofers' real-time delivery service that was available to them on an app, where they would be charged per delivery. Around this time, I had encouraged Madhuri to set up her own furnishing business from a small studio that we had set up in the basement of our home. Albi's app came in handy in her business and she ended up being one of the first few users of Grofers' B2B delivery service. I was approached by Albinder again in January 2015. By that time, he had already run the service for a few months and had raised $0.5 million seed round from Sequoia. This time he wanted me to help him create a formal pitch deck for Grofers' consumer-facing grocery delivery business and help raise funds. Having consumed so many pitch deck on the other side, I readily agreed to help him. Interestingly, the pitch deck of Grofers was made in AmEx office. My work for the day done at around 9 p.m. Albinder would come to the AmEx office and we would sit in the meeting room and work on the pitch deck. I was connected with the VCs and we raised $10 million in the Series A. The money raised, Albinder called me for a meeting to thank me for all the help that I had rendered. This was followed up with a proposal, why don't you join Grofers? I had been exposed to the entrepreneurial space long enough by the time and had begun to see that most founders had similar educational qualifications as me, and some of them had even worked for fewer years, which would mean they would have lesser money as a safety net while taking the plunge. This gave me a lot of confidence. As I made 80 lakh rupees as the annual salary at the time at AmEx, Albinder mentioned that those being early times at Grofers, they couldn't afford me at that salary, but they could offer me 40 lakh rupees as a fixed salary and would initially issue ESOPs for the balance of 40 lakhs. This was roughly at 35 million post-money valuation at the time. I tend to be an instinctive decision maker and trust people rather quickly. And this of course was a formal batchmate. Just like that, I agreed to Albi's offer. At that time, Flipkart had touched a valuation of $8 billion. My ask to Albinder was that if I delivered Grofers to a valuation of $8 billion, I should be able to earn rupees 100 crores for myself. In hindsight, rupees 100 crores, perhaps the largest figure I could think at that time. I'll be agreed. We shook hands on the promise, and here I was, ready to jump on the startup bandwagon. When my boss Sanjay Rishi heard of my decision, he was skeptical to say the least. From his perspective, leaving the stability of AmEx for an unheard of company whose office was a small warehouse and whose staff strength was some 15 odd people didn't make too much sense. However, seeing my resolve, he knew better than